Do you remember the smell of the cafeteria? The clatter of metal trays, the long lines of chattering kids, and that one mystery dish you hoped wouldn't be on the menu that day. 4 generations of American kids, school lunch was more than just a meal. It was a ritual. A time capsule of the era. A strange mixture of government rations, cafeteria, creativity, and the tastes of a nation finding its way after the Depression, after wars, and through cultural change. And while today's students scroll their phones while sipping flavored milk and eating chicken nuggets, the lunches of yesterday tell a very different story. Some were hearty, some were strange, and some were downright shocking. In this episode, we'll open the cafeteria doors to the past and revisit 30 vintage American school lunches that kids today wouldn't believe. From peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches to the famous rectangle pizzas, these forgotten meals reveal the flavors, struggles, and values of the times that shaped them. So grab your tray, slide down the lunch line, and let us dig into a menu of nostalgia you might not recognize, but you will never forget. Imagine sitting in the school cafeteria, unwrapping your sandwich, and instead of peanut butter and jelly, you find peanut butter and mayonnaise. Yes, mayo, thick, creamy, and spread right alongside the peanut butter. To today's kids, it sounds like a prank, but for decades, this was a real school lunch. Historical background. Context. The peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwich first became popular during the Great Depression, when families were desperate for cheap calories that could keep children full. Jelly and preserves were often too expensive, while mayonnaise was both affordable and widely available. The pairing gave a salty, tangy balance to the peanut butter's sweetness, and it was easy for school cafeterias and parents at home to prepare in bulk by the 1940s and 50s. This unusual sandwich had become a quiet staple in school lunchrooms across the country. Why it mattered or was popular? Too many children of that era, this wasn't a strange food at all. It was comfort. It provided energy for long school days, and most importantly, it was cheap. Teachers and cafeteria workers remember rows of kids biting into sticky, messy peanut butter and mayo sandwiches without a second thought. For kids who grew up in those times, it was simply what school lunch tasted like. Emotional or shocking twist. But for today's generation, the idea of mixing peanut butter with mayonnaise feels almost unthinkable. Even revolting. In fact, when stories of this sandwich resurface online, they spark debates. Some defend it as an underrated classic, while others gag at the thought. What was once a necessity for survival has now become a curiosity, almost a dare. A reminder of how differently we view food in times of scarcity versus abundance. Smooth transition to next point. And while peanut butter and mayonnaise sandwiches might make you squirm, they were only the beginning. Because the school cafeteria had plenty of other creations that, to today's students, would be just as shocking, like Spam and egg squares. Picture a steaming metal tray sliding down the cafeteria line, and on it, a square block of baked eggs studded with chunks of Spam. To many modern kids, this might look like a punishment. But for thousands of American school children in the mid-20th century, this was breakfast for lunch. And it kept them going. Historical background? Context. Spam, first introduced by Hormel in 1937, became a household name during World War II. It was cheap, shelf-stable, and packed with protein, making it an essential food for soldiers overseas and families back home. After the war, the government had massive surpluses of Spam, and schools became one of the easiest ways to use it up. Cafeterias combined it with eggs, another inexpensive commodity, and baked the mixture into square pans that could be cut into neat portion blocks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was filling. Why it mattered, or was popular. For children of the 1940s and 50s, Spam and egg squares weren't just food. They were a sign of the times. America was still recovering from war, and nothing went to waste. Kids learned to love the salty, savory flavor, especially when it was topped with a splash of ketchup or smothered in cheese. Teachers recall that while some kids groaned at Spam Day, others lined up for seconds. In many schools, this was considered a protein-packed, hearty lunch that would keep kids fueled through the afternoon. Emotional or shocking twist. Today, Spam carries a very different reputation. Often treated as a joke, food, or a nostalgic oddity. But in those days, it was a symbol of resilience, creativity, and survival. 2. A modern student used to pizza rolls and chicken nuggets. The idea of biting into a square of baked Spam and eggs would seem almost unbelievable. Yet for an older generation, that salty bite still brings back the taste of childhood. A reminder that even the humblest ingredients can become a lasting memory. Smooth transition to next point. And while Spam and eggs may have raised eyebrows, at least it was hearty. Some school lunches weren't just strange. They were downright dreaded. Just ask any student who lived through Liver and Onions Day. Every generation of school kids has that one meal they all dreaded. The one you could smell the moment you stepped into the cafeteria line. For thousands of students in mid-century America, that meal was liver and onions. Historical background. Context. Beef liver was once considered a powerhouse of nutrition rich in iron, protein, and vitamins. During the 1930s and 40s, government health campaigns actively encouraged families to eat organ meats, especially when prime cuts of beef were rationed during wartime. Cheap, plentiful, and endorsed by nutritionists, liver quickly became a staple in schools. Cafeterias often paired it with caramelized onions, hoping to mask the strong flavor and make it more palatable to children. For lunch ladies, it was practical. For kids, it was torture. Why it mattered, or was popular? To adults of the era, liver was considered a superfood, a way to ensure children grew up strong and healthy. Some students, especially those from farm families, were used to it at home and didn't mind. But for most kids, the tough texture and metallic taste were a nightmare. Teachers recall watching trays piled high with uneaten liver, and clever students traded desserts or bread rolls just to avoid taking a bite. Still, cafeterias served it proudly, believing they were doing right by their students' health. Emotional or shocking twist. Today, the idea of serving liver and onions to a lunchroom full of children feels almost unthinkable. Modern school menus focus on kid-friendly favorites like pizza, tacos, and chicken tenders. But in the mid-20th century, nutrition came before taste. For some adults, the memory of liver and onions in a school cafeteria still triggers shudders. While for others, it's a strange reminder of an America where health and frugality often outweigh joy at the lunch table. Smooth transition to next point. And if liver and onions were the most dreaded meal, the next dish was one of the most predictable. A tradition born from faith that soon spread across cafeterias everywhere. Fish Stick Fridays! Friday in the school cafeteria wasn't just another lunch. It was a ritual. For millions of kids across America, Friday meant one thing. Fish sticks, historical background. Context? The tradition of fish on Fridays came largely from America's Catholic population, who avoided meat on that day for religious reasons. By the 1950s, this practice was so widespread that school districts, even in non-Catholic communities, adapted their menus to fit it. That's where fish sticks came in. First introduced by Gorton's in 1953, fish sticks were cheap, easy to store, and simple to cook in massive quantities. They quickly became a cafeteria mainstay, showing up on trays across the country week after week. Why it mattered or was popular? Fish Stick Fridays weren't just about religion. They were about consistency. Kids knew what to expect, and lunch ladies knew how to prepare it. Served with tartar sauce or ketchup, alongside peas and mashed potatoes, the crunchy golden sticks became a comfort food for some students. For others, the smell alone was enough to make them wish they'd packed a lunch from home. Still, in the post-war years, they were considered a healthier, modern option. A far cry from the saltier Spam or mystery meats of earlier decades. Emotional or shocking twist? Today, fish sticks feel like a relic of another time, overshadowed by chicken nuggets and pizza slices. But for older generations, Fish Stick Friday was part of the weekly rhythm of school life. Some remember it fondly, dipping the crispy sticks into little cups of ketchup. Others recall soggy, overcooked fish that made them dread Fridays altogether. Either way, it was more than a meal. It was a cultural ritual that shaped the memory of an entire era of American cafeterias. Smooth transition to next point. And if Fridays were all about fish, the middle of the week had its own messy tradition. A sandwich so saucy, it left stains on trays, shirts, and memories alike. Sloppy Joe Wednesdays. Some school lunches weren't just meals. They were events. And few dishes were as memorable, as messy, or as beloved as Sloppy Joe's. Historical background. Context. The Sloppy Joe first gained popularity in the During the Great Depression, ground beef was cheap. Tomato sauce stretched it further, and a sandwich bun turned it into a filling meal. By the 1950s and 60s, this humble dish had found its way into nearly every American cafeteria. For schools, it was perfect, easy to make in bulk, affordable, and hearty enough to keep kids satisfied until the final bell. Why it mattered, or was popular. Wednesdays became Sloppy Joe Day in many districts, a midweek tradition that students looked forward to or dreaded, depending on how messy they were willing to get. Trays would slide down the line with soft hamburger buns, steaming ground beef in a sweet, tangy sauce, and maybe a scoop of corn or green beans on the side. For some kids, it was the highlight of the week. For others, the sloppy sandwich was a guaranteed shirt stainer. The kind of meal you ate carefully if you didn't want to go through the rest of the day with red splatters on your clothes. Emotional or shocking twist. Two kids today. Sloppy Joes feel almost old-fashioned. More like something you'd see in a retro cookbook than on a cafeteria tray. But for baby boomers and Gen X students, that smell of simmering beef and tomato sauce brings back instant memories of noisy lunchrooms and napkins that never seemed big enough. The dish was messy, yes, but it was also fun, comforting, and unmistakably American. Smooth transition to next point. Of course, not every cafeteria classic was remembered fondly. Some meals left kids scratching their heads, wondering exactly what they were eating. Like the ever-mysterious, gravy-covered classic, mystery meatloaf. Few sounds in the cafeteria were as unforgettable as the clatter of a giant metal tray being set down, filled with steaming, cheesy, beefaroni casserole. For some kids, it was comfort food. For others, it was cafeteria torture. Historical background! Context! Beefaroni itself was a creation of canned pasta giant Chef Boy, who rose to fame during the 1940s. By the 1960s and 70s, schools realized they could take those same cheap cans of pasta, bulk them up with extra ground beef and cheese, and bake them into massive casserole pans. It was affordable, filling, and could feed hundreds of students in one go. Why it mattered or was popular? For kids who liked pasta, this was a treat. Gooey cheese, soft noodles, and a tangy tomato sauce. It was as close as some would get to Italian food in the cafeteria. But not everyone was sold. Some complained it was soggy, bland, or just plain strange. You either loved beef or you dreaded it. Emotional or shocking twist. What's funny is that decades later, many former students who swore they hated it now look back at beefaroni with nostalgia. Maybe it wasn't gourmet, but it was warm, filling, and strangely comforting. Today, some retro cooks even try to recreate that exact cafeteria flavor, proving that even the most divisive dishes can turn into fond memories. Transition. And speaking of heavy and unforgettable, our next item wasn't just food, it was survival. The peanut butter and government cheese sandwich.